For 3,000 years, the pharaohs of Egypt ruled a land of gods and kings, a civilization of pyramids and temples, a culture the ancient world revered. But in its final chapter, Egypt's fate would rest not with a warrior king, but with a queen. A queen who outwitted generals, defied Rome, and became one of the most legendary figures in history. Her name was Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, and the woman who stood against an empire. By the mid-1st century BC, Egypt was no longer the unchallenged superpower it had been. The pyramids had already stood for 2,000 years, but the throne of the pharaohs was held by foreigners, the Ptolemies, descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals. The Ptolemaic dynasty blended Greek and Egyptian traditions. Its capital, Alexandria, was one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, home to the Great Library, where scholars gathered knowledge from across the known world. Its lighthouse of Pharos stood as one of the 7 wonders, guiding sailors safely into its bustling harbors. But beneath the brilliance of Alexandria lay instability. Court intrigues, assassinations, and sibling rivalries often tore the royal family apart. Egypt was rich, but its independence rested on a fragile balance with Rome, whose influence in the eastern Mediterranean grew stronger every year. Cleopatra grew up in this volatile atmosphere. Unlike her siblings, she was trained not only in the Greek traditions of her dynasty, but also in Egyptian religion and politics. She studied philosophy, mathematics, medicine, and rhetoric. Ancient sources claim she was the only Ptolemaic ruler to actually speak the native Egyptian tongue, a choice that helped her win loyalty from ordinary Egyptians. She could also converse in multiple other languages, from Hebrew to Aramaic to Median, making her a rare ruler who could meet foreign ambassadors without translators. From the beginning, she was being prepared for more than just ceremonial rule. She was groomed to be a survivor in a dangerous court. In 51 BC, at just 18 years old, Cleopatra took the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. But soon, she was forced into exile. Her chance came in 48 BC, when Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. According to legend, she had herself smuggled into his palace, rolled inside a carpet. With Caesar's support, Cleopatra regained her throne. But their victory did not come easily. What followed was the Alexandrian War, a brutal conflict where Cleopatra and Caesar were besieged inside the royal palace for months. Fire consumed part of Alexandria, and ancient writers claimed that during the fighting, a portion of the Great Library was lost. Eventually, Ptolemy XIII was killed in battle, leaving Cleopatra secure on the throne. Their alliance turned into romance, and Cleopatra gave birth to Caesar's son, Caesarion. For Cleopatra, this was more than romance. It was political survival. Aligning herself with Rome's most powerful man protected Egypt's independence, at least for a time. Yet Cleopatra did not simply rely on Caesar's shadow. She carefully cultivated her image in Egypt, reviving old festivals, overseeing temple constructions, and presenting herself as a restorer of Egypt's greatness. While Caesar was in Rome reshaping the Republic, Cleopatra was in Alexandria, ensuring her people saw her as both a Greek queen and a pharaoh in the ancient tradition. Cleopatra envisioned a rebirth for Egypt. She styled herself not only as queen, but as the living goddess Isis. When she and Caesar sailed the Nile together, they appeared as divine rulers, Osiris and Isis reborn, showcasing Egypt's glory to both her people and her Roman ally. But Caesar's assassination in 44 BC changed everything. Without him, Cleopatra's position was vulnerable. Soon, she found a new ally, Mark Antony. Their meeting in 41 BC became legendary. Cleopatra arrived on a golden barge, dressed as Isis, surrounded by music and incense. Antony was captivated. Together, they became not just lovers, but symbols of power and luxury. Ancient accounts describe their extravagant feasts, where they dined on golden couches and drank the finest wines. They even formed a society known as the Inimitable Livers, competing in lavish banquets and displays of wealth. Yet behind the luxury lay serious politics. Cleopatra secured Antony's loyalty to protect Egypt's sovereignty. Antony granted Cleopatra lands once held by the Seleucid Empire, expanding her kingdom's reach. Together they had 3 children, strengthening their bond both personally and politically. For Antony, Cleopatra was not merely a mistress, but a co-ruler. Their partnership blurred the lines between Rome and Egypt, alarming Octavian in Rome, who feared Antony was turning his back on Roman values for an Eastern monarchy. Cleopatra and Antony became allies against Octavian, the rising power in Rome. In 34 BC, at the famous donations of Alexandria, Antony granted eastern territories to Cleopatra's children. Most shockingly, he declared Caesarion, Cleopatra's son by Julius Caesar, as Caesar's true heir. In Rome, Octavian seized the moment. He framed Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign queen corrupting Antony. He declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra herself. Octavian's propaganda was relentless. Roman poets, orators, and politicians painted Cleopatra as a sorceress who bewitched Antony with exotic charms. She was accused of poisoning Roman honor with Eastern decadence. These narratives weren't just insults, they were weapons of war, shaping public opinion in Rome before a single battle was fought. The conflict exploded in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. Octavian's fleet crushed Antony and Cleopatra's forces. The battle was not just a sudden clash, but a prolonged stalemate at sea. Cleopatra commanded her own ships in the naval formation, and when defeat became clear, she personally led a breakout through Roman lines. Antony followed her retreat, a decision Octavian used to portray him as weak, abandoning his men for Cleopatra. Actium was more than a military disaster. It was a psychological blow that shattered their alliance's credibility. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria. Surrounded and hopeless, Antony fell on his own sword. Cleopatra, unwilling to be paraded through Rome, chose death on her own terms, legend says by the bite of an asp. With her death in 30 BC, the era of the pharaohs ended. Egypt became a Roman province. After her death, Octavian executed Caesarion, eliminating the last heir of Julius Caesar. Her children with Antony were spared, but taken to Rome, where they were paraded as trophies of Octavian's victory. Alexandria was stripped of much of its autonomy, its treasures absorbed into Rome's growing empire. For Egypt, Cleopatra's fall marked the true end of independence after thousands of years of pharaonic rule. For Rome, Cleopatra was a dangerous temptress, but history remembers her as more. She ruled Egypt for 22 years, spoke to her people in their own tongue, revived old traditions, and dared to stand against the might of Rome. Her legacy did not die with her. In the Middle Ages, Islamic and Persian writers remembered her as a wise and learned queen, associating her with alchemy and philosophy. In Renaissance Europe, Cleopatra became a symbol of beauty and tragedy. Shakespeare immortalized her in Antony and Cleopatra, portraying her as both passionate and cunning. Even in modern times, her image has captivated the world, from Elizabeth Taylor's famous portrayal in 1963 to countless novels, operas, and films that keep her story alive. Today, Cleopatra stands as a symbol of resilience and complexity. She was not merely a seductress or a victim of circumstance, but a ruler navigating impossible odds, caught between the fading power of Egypt and the rising empire of Rome. Her life forces us to ask, how far would we go to defend everything we've ever known? And her story reminds us that even when kingdoms fall, legends endure. Cleopatra may have lost her kingdom, but she won immortality. More than 2,000 years later, her name still evokes power, passion, and ambition. The last pharaoh of Egypt made her kingdom's final chapter unforgettable.